The first thing I'm going to do is specify in advance the colors that I plan to use. Color selection is just the name of a temporary variable I'm creating to store these 4 colors I've chosen. I've used their hex codes because I just want to specify the RGB values myself here. So this is the colors. Color selection is just that vector of 4 colors, strings representing colors. And pcalls is going to be a variable that I create that specifies what color each point should be plotted. So I'm going to start by assigning it to be the labels of the type factor. Pcalls now is just a string version of the type variable, but I'm going to change the values in pcalls. I'm going to do a for loop where I perform the same action 4 times, just like I've done a few times before, but this time that action is going to be assigning new values to pcalls. And each time I'm going to look at a subset of the pcalls values defined as the values that are currently equal to the ith level of the type variable. So the first iteration through this loop, I'm going to reassign the values of pcalls that are currently equal to Basenji, because Basenji is the first value in levels of $$ type, which is a vector of the 4 levels of that factor. So those pcalls that are equal to Basenji, I'm going to look at that subset of pcalls and not just look at it, but I'm going to reassign those ones to be the ith color selection, which is the string EE1166. So after I run this loop, then pcalls is a vector of these values, representing the color that I want each point to be plotted. If that's confusing, you could always run these 4 lines of code instead that I've commented out here. Those would accomplish the same thing. First, it would change the pcalls that are equal to Basenji to be EE1166, and all the ones that are equal to Beagle to be 6600FF, and so forth. So now I'm going to generate a plot based on those colors. I'm going to start by setting up the plotting space with margins that I want. Then I'm going to call the same scatterplot with jitter that I did before, but this time the call argument for color is just pcalls. That assigns a specific color to each point. I purposely repeated the same color for points that happen to share the same category, but R doesn't know or care that right here. It will just use the corresponding color for each of the points. That's this part. I run those 2 and I get the colors that I asked for. But then I'm going to add a legend. The legend function allows you to conveniently add a legend to a graph that will clarify what the colors or shapes or whatever mean in the graph. I'm going to position this legend at the arguments, the first 2 arguments here represent the position of the upper left corner of the legend. So I'm going to have it show up at 31.5, which is going to be sort of the lower right corner of the graph there. 31 is literally the value on the x-axis where the upper left corner of the legend will show up, and 5 is the value on the y-axis. The text in the legend is going to be the levels of $type, so Basenji, Beagle, and so forth. And call specifies that I want the colors of the legend symbols to be the color selection that I kept track of from earlier up here, that I defined as these 4 colors and that I then used in my plot. And the character that I want to show in the legend for each of those colors is character number 16. So this just makes a little box in my plot that clarifies that the pink dots are Basenji, the purple ones are Beagle, the green ones are Dachshund, and the blue ones are Greyhound. Questions about that?
Can you put legend in plot? I don't know if I've ever done these plots with the base function, but I know that with the other ones that I've used, it's an argument with plot that says legend equals true or something like that.
No, yeah, the base
Work.
plotting function doesn't have a legend argument that would automatically generate a legend. the plotting function here doesn't know that these are 4 categories, right? The only reason these points showed up in 4 different colors is because I specified that the color should be this vector of colors. That could have been I could have had every single point show up in a different color if I wanted to, but ahead of time I set it up so that pcalls would repeat those same 4 colors over and over again for each of the 4 categories that I know to be meaningful. But the plot function does not know that there are 4 categories here. And so there would be no way for it to automatically generate a legend for those 4 categories. I can generate a legend where I specify that I want the labels to be the labels of those 4 categories because I happen to know that those are meaningful labels for the colors that I've already plotted before.